but that 88 is pulling away.
Earnhardt, Johnson, Menard, Blaney, third-generation star, Dale Earnhardt Jr. brings him to the flag. Checkered flag, waving, it's over. It's Earnhardt. Earnhardt trying to cover all spots.
Oh, yeah! Good job, Junebug.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. Checkered flag at Talladega.
Why is this one so much fun? Because your grin told so many stories on your cool-down lap.
It's just real emotional. I haven't won here in a long time. It was my daddy's birthday a couple days ago. Just real emotional, man.
My nerd world.
So I'm giddy. I'm giddy because I'm looking at a leaderboard right now that has Dale Earnhardt Jr. sitting at the top spot with the only car so far in Daytona 500 practice that has cracked 194 miles an hour. The car is uber fast. You know, in NASCAR, we have heard and seen, we've heard stories and we've seen cars that have become somewhat infamous in NASCAR lore. The one that really pops into my head was, and this was prior to when I started watching NASCAR. So I wasn't watching at a time when Jeff Gordon had one particular car that won a bunch of races. And I don't really know of any cars in the past 10 years that have carried on this type of legacy that Dale Earnhardt Jr. now has in this car that they have dubbed Amelia. This is the car that they are going to be running in the 500 next weekend. This is the car that dominated the restrictor plate races last year. And we are going to be talking about this probably a lot more next week. This is the Sprint Unlimited race preview podcast. Welcome to it and my nerd world. I am your host, Jon Justice, as the 2016 season has arrived, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. But right now, practice is going on. It's the dual practice for next Thursday's races, but they're Daytona. I mean, these are their Daytona cars. And currently, right now, Dale Earnhardt Jr. has the fastest hot rod out there on the track. The good news is, for tonight's Sprint Unlimited race, it sounds like he's got a pretty fast car for tonight's race as well. So we will get into that shortly. And I'm excited. The new season's here. And it's just, I don't want to get too excited, but man, I think we're going to have a good season. We're off to a really, really good start, and Dale Jr. seems to be really happy heading into Speed Weeks. I mean, you're going to. You're coming off of a good year. I think we all wish that it would have ended maybe a little bit better than it did, obviously, in the chase for the championship. But we walked away with numerous wins last year. Dale Jr.'s life, his personal life is going just fantastic. Been following Junior through the offseason, and it really seems like this year is poised to be an even better year than last year was. And in no small part due to the fact that, now that Junior and Greg Ives have had a year to gel, we can, move forward and see what these guys are capable of. And a lot of the changes that are taking place within the sport, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that because there's a lot to talk about before we dive into sort of the normal routine of the Dale Jr. pre-race podcast. But, a lot of the changes that are being made in the sport, I think, are actually going to benefit Dale Jr. on a number of different levels. So we got a lot of ground to cover, a lot of racetrack to cover in this first podcast of the new year. I do want to mention a couple of things just up front. I do have a new email address where you can reach me at for this new season. Of course, you can always find me up on Twitter, Jon Justice, and of course on Facebook as well. But I got a brand new email that you can email the show anytime you like, talkshownerd at gmail.com. So if you ever want to drop me an email throughout the week, you have any questions about the podcast, you have any topics you want me to cover for the Dale Jr. Race preview, podcast, you can drop me an email at talkshownerd@gmail.com. So let's start off. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run through all the changes that NASCAR has put into place, including some stuff that just went down this week. A lot of changes in the sport. I want to cover what is new this year, give a little bit of commentary and my opinion on what NASCAR is doing, and then we'll get into the Dale Jr. portion of it. Talk about paint schemes, talk about merchandise, and then we'll preview tonight's race, the Sprint Unlimited, kicking off the season. This race to me is apart from, let me put it this way. Out of all the exhibition races, this is my favorite. The All-Star race, I could take it or leave it. And I've discussed this at length before. When it comes to the All-Star race, that race to me doesn't have a lot of weight to it. Tonight's race doesn't have any weight to it, but I really look forward to this race every year. Basically because it's the first race of the season. Sure, there are no points on the line, but the season hasn't started yet. So it gives you the opportunity to go out there, watch a race, have some fun, get the season kicked off in the right direction, and there's no gap. The problem that I have with like the All-Star race is that we're already into the season, and so anytime the cars are on the track, I want to see them competing for points and positions because it matters. Well, now the season hasn't officially started until Daytona next week, so this is just a great kickoff. So I love this race. Really looking forward to it to it this evening. So we'll give you the race preview here at the end of the podcast and my expectations for how Dale Jr. will fare tonight. And they're really, really good, by the way. But let's start off with the changes. And first off, back in, I guess mid-January, NASCAR came out and announced a lot of different changes for the new season. And we'll just run through these. The elimination-style playoff system is going to be coming to the other two major series, the Xfinity Series and the Camping World Truck Series. So you've got these will be a seven-race elimination-style playoff system for the Xfinity Series and for the trucks. Okay, 12 drivers will qualify for the Xfinity Series playoffs. 8 drivers will qualify for the Camping World Truck Series playoffs. You'll get 2 3-race elimination rounds in the Xfinity Series to whittle down the postseason field from 12 to 8 to 4 for the finale at Homestead. You'll get 2 3-race elimination rounds in the Truck Series, and that will whittle down the postseason field from 8 drivers to 6 to 4 again at the finale at Homestead. I'm excited, and I'm glad that NASCAR did this. I follow all 3 series. The Sprint Cup Series is the only one that I kind of dedicate to watch live, mostly because of lifestyle. If I were single, I probably would watch all of the races live, and I still try to watch all of the races live. But because I'm not, because I have a wife and 2 boys, and I do not want to completely dismiss them every single weekend, the truck races and the Xfinity races, I'll DVR and go back and watch those delayed. But I do follow those. I am of the opinion that we should get the Cup drivers out of the Xfinity Series. I think that would make it, and to a certain extent the trucks as well. I think that would make that series a lot more interesting to watch. But I know that's not going to happen anytime soon because there's a lot of dollars attached to having the Cup drivers go down and race in both of those series. And look, from a selfish standpoint, I really don't want that to happen because I'm a Dale Jr. fan, and Dale Jr. does go down and race in the Xfinity Series on occasion, and I would love to see him go and race in the Truck Series at some point. Having the elimination style playoff system come to both of those series, I think, really is going to enhance their presence, and it is going to also diminish the Cup drivers coming into the series and kind of shaking things up. The Cup drivers already couldn't compete for a championship, but it is going to put more emphasis later in the season on those regular Truck and Xfinity Series drivers and add a lot of drama to the end of the season. I think it's a fantastic move for NASCAR's part. And what I find interesting about it is it almost worked in reverse of what we're going to see with the next item I'm going to talk about, because usually you would see NASCAR perhaps test some things in the lower series, and then if it works, bring it to the upper series, right? And certainly that's the case with this caution clock that I'll talk about here in a moment. In this case, NASCAR went and, brought the chase and the playoff system to the Sprint Cup Series. It worked, so now they're going to bring it down to the Xfinity and Truck Series, and I think that's a really wise move. I've also heard on the for the Sprint Cup Series that they've gotten rid of naming the different eliminations. The contender, the qualifier rounds. They've gotten rid of the names for the rounds. It's just going to be round 1, round 2, round 3, I think, which I think was a smart move. That was really, it's all gimmicky. Let's not, kid ourselves. This is all NASCAR's attempt to bring more people to the racetrack and more eyes to the television screen. However, there's gimmicky and then there's, okay, that's just silly. Get rid of this contender eliminator round and let's just call them what they are, just rounds. Let's just get rid of sort of the goofiness of it. Now, speaking of goofiness, many people are thinking that this is goofy. And for me personally, my apologies there. I've been fighting just a nasty cold all week long. A lot of people think this is goofy. And for me personally, I like it. I like that they're going to do this in the Truck Series, and if it works, I'll be honest, I would not be all that upset if they brought it up to Xfinity and even Sprint Cup. What I'm talking about is the caution clock. Now, for those that are familiar, you know what I'm talking about. For those that aren't familiar with it, it's a 20-minute timer that begins when the green flag drops. And when the time runs out, a caution is called. If a caution occurs before the clock reaches 0, the clock will then be reset. This will just be in the Camping World Truck Series. So, again, just to reiterate, so the race starts, and then essentially there's going to be a 20-minute timer. And if the race goes green and there is no caution, then at the end of that 20 minutes, there'll be an automatic caution will come out. Okay? And then once they go green, the clock will be reset at 20 again. With 20 laps to go, they will turn the caution clock off, and the trucks will race to the end of the race. That's going to change on some of the larger tracks. I think Pocono, and I want to say they don't run Indianapolis. There was another. The road courses. So the road courses and at Pocono, the caution clock will stop at 10 laps to go, just because those laps are so long. Now, you need to kind of look at the math on this, because you may go, well, that's just gimmicky and silly. It could be. However, if you're looking at trying to bring new eyes to the sport, it's like anything. I was never a big baseball, football, basketball fan. I would tune in, and still do on occasion, certainly with football. I always watch the playoffs when it comes to football. Every once in a while, I'll tune into the baseball World Series if I get swept up in it. Sometimes I'll tune into the basketball playoffs. But if you're trying to bring new eyes to the sport, you've got to get people hooked and involved at some point. When I got into NASCAR, I suddenly realized why other people were such big fans of other sports. Once you begin to learn the nuances of it and its ins and outs, then you begin to appreciate it more. And that's not to say I don't know about basketball and baseball and football. I do. I just never been a huge fan of those. I do know, actually it was funny because I was teaching my boys about football this year during the playoffs, and I think I shocked my wife Melinda in how much knowledge I actually had of the sport. But if you're trying to bring in new eyes to the sport and you want to perhaps, have them be introduced via the Truck Series to begin to learn the nuances of the sport, putting